Remember when Natalie Wood remarried Robert Wagner 3 months after her divorce from Richard Gregson? I do. Natalie and Richard, known as RJ, remained friendly after their divorce, seeing each other on occasion. In 1970, they reconnected at a dinner party when Natalie was 6 months pregnant with Natasha and RJ had just separated from his wife, Marion. RJ followed Natalie home that night to ensure that she got home safely, and when they arrived, she asked him if he was happy. He said, "I'm happy you're having a baby." He followed up the reunion with flowers. After Natalie and Richard separated, she started talking to RJ on the phone often and eventually invited her to his home in Palm Springs in January of 1972. And just like that, they were back together. Natalie's friends were hesitant of the reunion. They told her to put on the brakes. She said that both she and RJ were in shock about their reconnection, that there had been a lot of growth since they had broken up. They talked about what happened in their marriages, saying that RJ had become a man instead of a boy. They announced the reunion to the world by attending the 1972 Oscars together and then flew to New York and hopped on the Queen Elizabeth II headed for England. Due to a storm, one so intense they thought that the reunion might be cut short by the raging seas, their ship arrived later than intended. Reporters were shocked to see the pair together. Word just didn't travel as fast in the 1970s. Reporters, of course, asked the couple about their intention to remarry. RJ said probably not anytime soon. He was having some personal financial troubles at the time. He was in the middle of his divorce, was getting sued over a business deal that soured, and was having a wee bit of trouble with the IRS. His professional career was doing well, though. He was on ABC's It Takes a Thief, which earned him a cool $10,000 an episode. That would be around $81,000 today, and was actively working on the small screen, taking on more TV and TV movie roles, whereas Natalie had been slowing down in her career, only taking a project on every few years in order to focus on her family. The pair did indeed wed, though, that summer, in fact. On July 16th, 1972, Natalie and RJ said "I do" once again, this time on a 55-foot yacht named the Ramblin' Rose, which was anchored off of Malibu's Paradise Cove. Their ceremony was private with close friends and family, and of course, their 2 daughters, Katie and Natasha. The pair honeymooned on their yacht, cruising around Catalina Island. Natalie had said of the second time around that when RJ and I were married the first time, we were like 2 children acting out a studio script. We deliberately hid our weaknesses from each other. Now we found that we could really talk to each other. We were not afraid to be ourselves, but we realized that we needed those years apart to reach that understanding. Their friend, playwright Matt Crowley, said that people used to expect the pair to be dolls living in a doll's house, but that they learned to confront the problems that existed. They learned to believe in themselves. The couple settled in on Cannon Drive in Beverly Hills with their blended family, and on March 9, 1974, welcomed daughter Courtney. Natasha split her time between her home in Beverly Hills with Natalie and RJ, whom she called Daddy Wagner, and abroad with Richard, Daddy Gregson. The family had 9 years together, 9 years of sailing in Natalie's infamous ranch-style eggs. Friends would talk about how in love they were, how happy. But then in 1981, Natalie had decided to go back to work. She had taken on a role in the film Brainstorm as Karen Brace alongside Christopher Walken, who played her husband, Dr. Michael Brace, with the majority of filming taking place that September over 6 weeks. That Thanksgiving, Natalie had wanted to host friends aboard their yacht, the Splendor, but many of them were unable to attend, saying that the weather was unfavorable. Or it could have been the storm that was brewing between RJ and Natalie. There had been some tension between the couple over Natalie returning to work. RJ was unhappy with how much time she had been spending away from home since taking on her new project. He had told reporters that he was struggling with the time apart, that they had never been apart as long as when Natalie was in North Carolina shooting Brainstorm. Meanwhile, he had been in Hawaii filming Heart to Heart. It didn't help that there was also palpable tension between RJ and Natalie's Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken, who happened to be in town filming another movie. Natalie had tried to convince her friends to join her on the boat. She felt pulled in 2 directions, the one that Chris represented, which was the artistic freedom that she so desired, and the family life that RJ represented. But due to the weather and previous commitments, Chris was the only one who was able to join them. The day after Thanksgiving, Natasha asked her mom not to go on the boat. It was raining. She was scared, but Natalie told her everything would be okay. The day that they had set out on the yacht, Natalie had called a friend to ask if he had heard from RJ. They had fought. She called back later saying that everything was okay. But she didn't sleep on the boat that night. Instead, she opted to stay in a hotel in Avalon. RJ said it was because they weren't able to get a mooring and that the seas were rough and uncomfortable. They fought over whether or not to move the boat. Chris and RJ stayed behind while the ship's captain, Dennis DeVerne, took Natalie ashore to stay at a hotel. The following day on November 28th, Natalie returned and they headed for Isthmus Cove to show Chris where they had spent their honeymoon. RJ took a nap since he and Chris had been up all night taking turns keeping watch. Natalie and Chris headed ashore to Doug's Harbor Reef for dinner with Dennis. RJ grabbed a shore boat to join the three for dinner after he woke up. The restaurant's night manager was concerned that the four had imbibed too much and would not be able to get back to their boat, so he asked the harbor patrol to ensure that they got back safely. Upon returning to the boat, they cracked open another bottle of wine and things got heated. Chris told RJ that Natalie was talented and that he thought it was important that she worked. RJ told him to stay out of her life. It probably didn't help that there were rumors that Natalie and Chris had been having an affair, one that many close to Natalie had vehemently denied, including the director of Brainstorm, who said that they had zero chemistry during their intimate scenes. RJ was so enraged that evening that he smashed the wine bottle on the table and then, according to Dennis's statement, yelled at Chris, "What are you trying to do? F my wife?" Only he said the word. Natalie said, "I cannot take this," and headed to her room. Chris attempted to take a breather, going up to the deck, and RJ followed, continuing to tell him to mind his own business. According to RJ, the two ended up going back below deck to chat after RJ had calmed down. Afterwards, Chris retired to his cabin. RJ and Dennis stayed up to clean the mess in the salon from RJ smashing the glass and talked about their plans to head back to the mainland the next day. He then went to the stateroom, but Natalie wasn't in bed. He checked the bathroom. She wasn't there either. He checked the aft end of the boat and discovered that the dinghy was gone. That's when he alerted Chris and Dennis that Natalie was nowhere to be found. This was around 11:05 p.m. that night. They suspected that she might have gone ashore, and so RJ called a shore boat to check if she had moored the dinghy at one of the slips in Isthmus. But she wasn't there. Then they called the shore patrol, but they hadn't seen her either. They finally called the Coast Guard at 3:30 a.m. Dennis's account of the night went a little differently, though. He said that after Natalie left for her room, Chris went to his room and RJ went to his shared room with Natalie. Dennis went up to the bridge, but he could hear RJ and Natalie arguing in their room. He could also hear thumping noises like there was a physical fight happening. Concerned, he went to their room and knocked on the door, claiming that when RJ answered the door, he had a crazed look on his face. Dennis asked, "Is everything okay, boss?" And RJ told him to go away, so he returned to the bridge. He said that while he couldn't see what was happening, that he could hear everything and that the fight continued, eventually relocating to the back of the boat. Witnesses later found also claimed to have heard Natalie and RJ fighting at the back of the boat, and then suddenly everything stopped. There was complete silence. Dennis said that upon discovering that Natalie was missing, he was asked to search the boat, and that RJ refused to call for help. He suggested turning on the searchlight and claimed that RJ said, "Don't do that." He said maybe they should get on the radio for help. RJ said not to call anyone, to just wait and see if she would come back. But Natalie didn't come back. Instead, RJ's friend Doug Bombard joined the search for her and found her lifeless body floating at the top of the water at 7:44 a.m. on November 29th. What happened next? Well, we'll talk about that in the next episode when we wrap up the Natalie Wood series within a series. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked this one. If you did, please consider saving and sharing this video with your friends to help indoctrinate them into the cult of Megs and to tell this app to show people my videos. We also have stickers and bookmarks and pins to help you show the world your cult allegiance, and there's also a Patreon. It's a party. Join that if you so desire. I'd also like to take a moment to thank my September Patreons. I appreciate your patronage. Big thanks to Sarah, Brandy, Allison, Amanda, Alyssa, Mama Kate, Pamela, Mimi, Angie, Liz, Renee, Caitlin, Lindsay, Anasol, Heather, Luetta, Vanessa, Calandria, Tessa, Jessica, Josie, Mumbly, Vane, Patra, and Liz. Thanks for helping me make these videos possible. I appreciate you. Good day, and may the cult be with you.